The seal pup reached the breakwater late. Not late in the day, late in strength. Her strokes had shortened over the last stretch of open water, flippers cutting less cleanly through the swell as fatigue accumulated quietly. The stones ahead rose dark and angular from the surface, their shape familiar from earlier visits, their presence usually enough to calm the water behind them. Usually. She slipped into the lee of the breakwater and paused, letting her body rise and fall with the swell while she caught her breath. The stone wall blocked the direct force of the waves, but the water did not settle as expected. It continued to surge, rolling unevenly, lifting and dropping her without rhythm. The swell did not ease. She floated, head up, whiskers forward, reading movement through pressure rather than sight. The water here felt confused, energy bending around stone instead of breaking against it. Waves arrived from angles that did not align, crossing and folding into each other rather than flattening out. This was wrong. Breakwaters worked by stealing momentum. They forced waves to collapse, to lose shape and height, creating calmer pockets where young seals could rest, climb out, or feed briefly without fighting the sea. Here, the energy stayed trapped. The pup kicked gently toward the rocks, hoping to haul out onto a lower ledge where the stone dipped closer to the surface. Her flippers brushed algae-slick rock, but the next surge lifted her abruptly and pushed her sideways, away from the spot she had aimed for. She tried again. This time, the water dropped unexpectedly, leaving her flippers scraping stone without purchase before another surge slammed into her chest, knocking air from her lungs in a sharp, silent burst. She backed off instinctively, not far, just enough to regain buoyancy and breath. Panic wasted energy she could not afford. She floated again, sides heaving, blinking salt from her eyes. The swell continued. It rebounded off the stones and returned toward her, shorter and steeper now, each wave colliding with the next. There was no pause between them, no flat moment to time a climb. She waited. Waiting here cost strength, but trying blindly cost more. She watched the water closely, tracking the pattern of lift and drop, searching for any repetition she could use. None appeared. The breakwater had reshaped the waves, but it had not reduced them. Energy wrapped around the stones and returned inward, creating a pocket that looked sheltered but behaved like open water squeezed into a smaller space. The pup felt cold creep deeper into her body. Not sudden, progressive. Her fur still trapped air, but repeated surges forced water through it, compressing insulation and stealing warmth. Each breath came a little faster now, the rhythm edging toward urgency. She turned her head toward the open water briefly. Beyond the breakwater, the swell was larger, but cleaner. Waves rose and fell with more consistency, offering predictable timing even if they demanded more power. Here, unpredictability was the danger. She floated again, conserving movement, deciding. A larger wave surged in, lifting her high enough that her chest brushed the rock again. For a brief second, she could have lunged, thrown her weight forward and tried to hook herself onto the stone. She did not. The angle was wrong. The water dropped too fast. A failed attempt here could pin her against rock, drain what strength remained, or force her underwater where rebound waves struck hardest. She let the wave pass and sank back into the confused water. The breakwater loomed beside her, solid, unmoving, offering the idea of safety without the condition required to use it. The swell did not ease. And as the seal pup floated in water that refused to calm even behind stone meant to break it, she began to understand that reaching shelter was not the same as accessing it, and that this day would be decided not by finding the right place, but by recognizing when a place that looked protective had failed to change the behavior of the sea at all. The pup tried again. Not immediately. After several long breaths, after the sharpness in her chest softened enough to allow calculation to return. She aligned herself parallel to the stones, letting the surge lift her rather than fighting it, timing her movement to the crest instead of the trough. The wave rose. For a moment, The water carried her upward cleanly. She kicked twice and angled her body toward the rock, extending her foreflippers to feel for purchase. The surge collapsed sideways. Instead of pressing her gently toward the breakwater, it twisted, dragging her flank first into a rebound that spun her just enough to miss the ledge. Her flippers scraped stone again, briefly, then slid off as the next wave arrived too soon. She dropped back into the water. Harder this time. The impact was not violent, but it was draining. Her body had to recover orientation, re-establish buoyancy, clear water from her nostrils. Each recovery cost more than the last. She floated again, panting now, head tilted back slightly to keep her airway clear as the swell lifted and lowered her in uneven pulses. Another seal surfaced nearby. Older, larger. It held position closer to the stones, using its mass to resist the rebound more effectively. Even so, it did not attempt to haul out. It simply floated, eyes half-lidded, letting waves pass beneath it without commitment. That mattered. If the older seal was waiting, not resting, then the conditions were not yet usable. A second pup appeared farther down the breakwater, its small body rising and falling sharply with each surge. It tried to climb once, rushed, mistimed, and was slapped back into the water immediately, disappearing beneath a steep rebound before resurfacing again, farther from the rocks than before. No one had succeeded. The swell continued to stack inside the lee, waves colliding without space to flatten. Energy that should have been broken by stone instead folded back into the pocket, trapping movement rather than releasing it. The pup felt fatigue deepen. Her flippers responded a fraction slower now. Each kick felt heavier, less efficient. Cold pressed closer to her core, no longer held fully at bay by fur and air. She needed rest, not floating rest, still rest. She turned her head again toward open water. Beyond the breakwater, the swell was higher, but it moved in longer lines. Between crests, brief moments of predictability existed, enough to breathe, to align, to choose. Here, there were none. Another surge lifted her abruptly and slammed her sideways again, not against stone this time, but into the turbulent pocket where waves reflected off each other. Her body rolled involuntarily, flippers splaying wide before she corrected. She surfaced coughing, then steadied. Panic flickered. Brief, sharp, then passed. Panic wasted oxygen. She forced her breathing to slow, even as her heart hammered. She could not stay here long. Waiting for the swell to ease assumed it would. There was no evidence it would. Wind offshore still fed the system. Tides were misaligned. The breakwater, designed for different conditions, reshaped energy without absorbing it. This place was not wrong. It was wrong today. The pup watched the older seal again. It began to angle away from the stones, not quickly, not dramatically, but with intention. It slipped between two surges and let the swell carry it outward, toward cleaner water. The pup followed with her eyes. Decision sharpened. Staying meant continuing to spend strength without rest. Leaving meant re-entering larger water with what energy remained, risky but honest. She waited for a brief alignment between waves, not calm, but consistency, then turned her body outward and kicked. The first strokes were heavy. The water resisted, pulling her back once, then again, but she persisted, choosing forward movement over waiting inside a trap that looked like shelter. As she cleared the breakwater's influence, the swell changed character. Waves rose higher, but they spaced out. Her body adjusted almost immediately. Timing returned. She could breathe between crests. She could let waves pass beneath her instead of being twisted by them. She did not look back. The breakwater receded behind her, still breaking waves, still throwing energy sideways instead of letting it dissipate. The swell did not ease there, but out here it made sense again. The pup swam on, exhausted but oriented. Understanding now that reaching shelter did not guarantee rest, and that sometimes the only way to survive rough water was to leave the place that promised safety but failed to deliver the pause her body needed to recover at all. The sound reached the water before the shape appeared. A low mechanical hum rolled across the swell, uneven and persistent, carried by air and surface alike. The seal pup felt it as vibration first, a change in pressure that travelled through the water and into her chest before it resolved into noise. A boat was approaching. Small, close to shore. The pup lifted her head and turned toward the sound instinctively. Boats often meant people, and people sometimes meant calm, floating platforms, still edges, places where waves broke differently, but the swell did not ease. The boat slowed near the breakwater, its hull rising and falling awkwardly as reflected waves struck it from below. The engine cut briefly, then started again, sending a new pattern of disturbance across the already confused water. The surface worsened. Wakes from the boat crossed the natural swell at shallow angles, stacking unpredictably. Waves steepened instead of flattening, their timing breaking down further. The pocket behind the breakwater tightened, water pushed and pulled without pause. The pup, now just outside the worst of it, felt the change immediately. The water lost what little rhythm it had regained. She kicked to maintain position, flippers slicing harder now as the surface grew more chaotic. Each stroke spent energy she had hoped to conserve. Other seals reacted. The older seal that had left earlier turned sharply away from the boat, diving deep to escape surface turbulence. The second pup surfaced again closer to the stones, confused by the new motion, its head lifting and dropping rapidly as it struggled to read the water. Voices carried faintly. Human. Not loud. Not directed. But present. The boat idled, then nudged closer to the breakwater, its bow pointing toward the rocks as if seeking the same shelter the seals had. Instead, it added force where force was already trapped. The pup felt a surge lift her sharply, then slam her down into a trough that collapsed almost immediately. Water rushed over her head. She surfaced sputtering, nostrils flaring as she forced air back into her lungs. Cold cut deeper now. Her movements slowed perceptibly. Not dangerously yet, but enough to reduce margin. Each correction took longer to complete. Each breath came a fraction later than she wanted it to. The boat changed position again. Its wake reflected off the breakwater and returned inward, striking the pocket head-on. The water surged violently, not high, but fast, twisting bodies instead of lifting them. The pup was caught in it. She rolled once, then again, flippers splayed wide before she corrected, fighting to keep her head above water as overlapping waves struck from two directions at once. She did not panic, but fear sharpened focus brutally. This place was no longer merely unusable, it was actively hostile. The boat's engine revved briefly, then cut again. The hull drifted, its mass still disturbing water long after power ceased. Human shapes leaned over the side, looking down, pointing, but doing nothing that reduced motion. They could not. The problem was not awareness, it was physics. The pup kicked hard, angling away from the breakwater and the boat together, using a brief alignment between two surges to slip outward. Her body protested immediately, flippers burning as cold and fatigue converged. She did not stop. Behind her, the water churned harder now, a tight knot of intersecting waves fed by stone, swell, and hull. Ahead, the open water waited, rough but readable. She broke free of the reflected chaos and let herself rise with a longer wave, breathing deeply as she reached its crest. For a moment, her head lifted high enough to see clearly again. The boat remained near the rocks. The seals scattered. No one approached the stones now. The breakwater, once a landmark of safety, had become an amplifier, collecting motion, returning it inward, and punishing anything that lingered too close. The pup swam on. Every stroke hurt now, but each one translated into distance rather than correction. The swell here was still large, still demanding, but it offered intervals. It allowed anticipation. She did not know where she would rest yet, only that it would not be near stone that trapped energy or machines that added to it. Behind her, the boat's sound faded gradually, swallowed by wind and water. The swell it had worsened continued for some time, then slowly reorganized once the extra motion bled away. The pup kept moving until the water made sense again, and as she swam through open waves that finally rose and fell with honesty, she understood something that would stay with her long after the day ended. Help that arrived without understanding could increase danger, and shelter that failed to calm the sea could become the most exhausting place of all, especially for those too small, too tired, or too trusting to leave it soon enough. The swell did not calm quickly. It took distance. As the pup swam farther from the breakwater, the water began to change not in height, but in behaviour. Waves still rose tall, their crests breaking white in places, but they no longer collided at sharp angles. Energy moved forward instead of folding back on itself. This mattered. Her body adjusted almost without instruction. She let the swell lift her, then slid down its back, timing breaths to the long rhythm that returned gradually. The water was still difficult, but it was honest. Cold remained, fatigue remained, but panic did not. She floated briefly on her side between two larger waves, allowing her muscles to loosen for a few seconds without surrendering buoyancy. Her breathing slowed from urgency into something closer to control. This was rest, not the kind she had sought near the stones, not stillness, not shelter, but relief through predictability. Farther out, darker water opened where the swell lengthened again. The pup angled toward it, choosing direction that reduced correction rather than fighting motion that refused to resolve. She did not look back. Behind her, the breakwater continued to stand, unmoving and absolute, still breaking waves without calming them. The boat had gone or drifted farther away. The pocket of trapped energy would settle eventually, but not in time to matter. The pup swam until her strokes no longer shortened with each wave. She found a current that carried her slightly sideways rather than straight on, easing effort without pulling her back toward shore. She followed it instinctively, conserving strength where she could. Time passed without measurement. Only rhythm marked it. When she finally hauled herself onto a low, sloping stretch of rock far from the breakwater, not engineered, not vertical, the motion beneath her was reduced enough to allow contact without punishment. Waves still washed over her lower body, but they did so evenly, without slam or twist. She lay still. Water drained from her fur slowly. Air returned between hairs. Cold eased its grip just enough to stop advancing. She did not sleep. She rested. There was a difference. As light shifted and the swell continued its long passage across the open water, the pup remained where movement no longer demanded constant correction. She would recover fully later, perhaps with others, perhaps alone. What mattered was that she had left in time. The breakwater had promised shelter by shape alone. It had offered no pause, no space for a tired body to regain balance. Staying there would have cost everything slowly, without drama. Leaving had cost effort. But it had returned control. The sea did not become kind, it became readable. And for a seal pup learning the boundary between protection and pressure, that was enough. Not because the water eased, but because she chose the place where it finally allowed her to move with it instead of being punished for waiting where stillness never came. The swell rolled on. The stones held fast. And the pup, breathing steadily now, stayed alive long enough to learn which shelters only looked like safety, and which kinds of water, even rough, still allowed rest to exist at all.